Good evening, everyone. Welcome to SEPTA's Bus Revolution Fall 2022 Transit Talk. My name is Beverly Harper. I'm president of Portfolio Associates and member of the engagement team. Again, welcome. We have a wonderful group of people. We had 500 people who registered, and about 200 are on the call now. This session will be recorded and will be posted to SEPTA's website in the near future. Please, I have a couple of tech reminders, and then I'll review the agenda with you, and we'll get started. We have quite a bit of information to share with you this evening. We've been busy. Please put your questions in the Q&A function. Some of them will be answered live, and others will be answered directly in the chat. There'll be several times during the session when we'll break to ask a couple of questions and to have you ask questions, and we provide answers. Your video is turned off and your speaker is muted, and you can imagine that that's necessary with over 200 people who are now in the session. There is a transcription function that you can turn on if you need it. So I'd like to briefly review the agenda for this evening. Thank you, tech team. There'll be an overview and update on what we've accomplished so far. Then the presentation will start with what our strategic approach has been, and the network redesign recommendations. There'll be a quick look at the website and a cool web tool that has been developed for this project. Again, there'll be an opportunity for questions and answers. After the questions and answers, there'll be a brief presentation about how you can learn more about the specific network redesign and more specific recommendations. I have two questions that we'd like you to answer at this point. We're up to about 225 people on the call. So the first question is this the first time you have participated in a bus revolution event? That's a yes or no question. So you can put your answers in. And the second question is, if you have participated in a bus revolution event, which one did you participate in? And you can check all that apply. Did you participate in one of the virtual transit talks that we had? Did you visit the website? Did you join a community conversation? Did you attend a pop-up event that we did all over the region? Did you see the project bus at a community event? Did you take the survey, or did you do something else? You could have sent a question in. You could have made a call. So let us know what you have participated in. So I'll give you a couple minutes, a couple seconds actually, to answer whether you have participated in an event previously and what kind of event did you participate in. And now we'll get the answers. Excellent. So we have about 75% of you have not participated before. So a double welcome to you. You're about to get a lot of information. And for those of you who have participated before, we have 55% participated in a transit talk and 47% visited the website. I love seeing that. So with that, I'd like to introduce from SEPTA, Dan Nemiroff, who is the manager of planning projects and project manager for the bus revolution. There'll be two other speakers this evening, Bethany Whitaker and Keaton Wetzel. And of course, Henry Felsman from my staff will moderate the Q&A. Our tech team, our crack tech team is with us also in case we run into any technology issues, but of course we won't. So thank you everyone for being here, and I'll turn it over to Dan.
Thanks, Beverly. So as Bev said, my name is Dan Nemiroff, and I'm the project manager from SEPTA for the Bus Revolution. And I've probably talked to some of you, but if you're here for the first time, welcome. Really appreciate you taking the time this evening to come and check out the work and provide input. Next slide. So because so many of you are new, and because we keep getting asked, what is Bus Revolution? We do want to kind of go back to talking about what the core reason and benefits of this project are. So without getting too into the weeds, I'll say Bus Revolution, it's a blank slate redesign of our entire fixed route bus network in the city and the suburbs. When we say blank slate, that does not mean we're changing everything. It does mean, however, that everything was on the table through the process, through the existing conditions work, through the development of our two scenarios, which we shared in the fall, and what we're sharing now. We didn't necessarily want to get bogged down in sort of sacred cows that service planners have always, or that SEPTA sort of has always put out there, but we wanted to take a fresh look at our system and say, if we were building it from scratch, what would it look like? So that's what the project is. There's other components to the project. There's some, improvements to, monitoring techniques and scheduling techniques and some investigation of capital projects. But really the core meat of the project and what we've been working on very hard and what we're sharing tonight is a redesign of the existing bus system. Next slide. The project has three core goals, which we established earlier in the process and have really been our guiding light, since day one. The goals are to put the rider experience first, increase access to opportunity, and to build trust with reliable service. When we say put the rider first, we mean we want our service to be frequent and reliable, which are the two things customers in every single conversation survey have said. They want their service to be reliable and they want it to be frequent. And we also want to improve connectivity and for transferring and all that stuff that impacts a rider's day-to-day life. We want to increase access to opportunity. This means we want people to be able to get further faster using the system. We do not want transit to be a barrier to, seeing a friend or taking a job or making an appointment. We want people to be able to use the system for different reasons, at different times of day, different days of the week, and we want to be able to measure those things. And then finally, to build trust with a reliable service. This is about partnerships. This is about a partnership with the city of Philadelphia, where about 90% of our fixed route service is. This is about working more closely with our counties and suburban municipalities to give people the reliability that they need and seek out of transit service. And that goal maybe is a bit longer term in nature, but it's something that we take really seriously and is a priority for the authority. Next slide. SEPTA, the Bus Revolution is part of SEPTA Forward, our strategic plan. And there are three tentpole projects. You've probably heard about both of the other ones. So I don't want to spend a lot of time, but Project Metro, it was our wayfinding project. You're going to start seeing signs in the system really soon, kind of reshaping the Metro system under one banner so that we can, communicate better and plan capital improvements better. The other project is reimagining regional rail, which is going through a similar process, identifying different scenarios, and then providing sort of a way forward, again, to reimagine how we can run our regional rail system, and how we can really better integrate it with all of the other modes that we have. Next slide. From an approach perspective, we've been working on this project since spring of last year. So, May 2021 or so, I believe we had our first kickoff transit talk. We spent a lot of last year looking at the existing system, doing a deep dive into how it performed at a network level, but also looking at individual bus routes. That was supplemented by a survey about transit trade-offs, like would you walk further for more frequent service, et cetera. In 2022, we pivoted to identifying opportunities for improvement and then packaging those opportunities into two different scenarios, which we shared from about April through June of this year. Over the summer, we worked extremely hard to put together, to kind of synthesize those two, the feedback that we got on those two scenarios, and put together this draft proposed network, which we launched today and are sharing this evening. And this phase of engagement is going to last roughly till the holidays, till mid to late December. We've got a lot of great events planned. We've got a lot of outreach ahead of us, and we're excited for that. But going forward, beyond the end of the year, early 2023, we will, refine, address comments that we received during this round of engagement. Then we will head into another round of public outreach, late winter or so of 2023. That outreach will lead directly into a hearing and board process, which is which will precede implementation. And sitting from where we are now, we'd like to begin implementing some of the modifications, some of the more schedule-based ones, probably in fall of 2023, with more complex changes going in 2024. Next slide. So I'm going to hand it off to Bethany now, and she's going to take us through and introduce the bus network, the draft bus network.
Excellent. Sorry, I had to find the unmute button. Some things never change. So thank you, everybody, for being here. Welcome to this conversation, this transit talk. My name is Bethany Whitaker. I work for a company called Nelson Nygaard. We're consultants who work in the transit industry, and I'm here with my colleague Keaton Wetzel. You'll hear from him in a minute. And we are working with SEPTA to help them do some of the technical work, provide some perspective and some analysis as we put together this bus revolution project. So I am pleased that, a whole bunch of you, about 75%, are new to the bus revolution. And so I think what I'm going to do first is kind of walk through a little bit of some of the background, some of the context, some of the analysis that led to the draft network, and then we'll spend a couple minutes looking at it. What Keaton is going to do is show you how to find more information on the website, and then we'll give you some ideas and information about when we're holding open houses, when we're going to be doing some more virtual conversations, things like that, so that there's more, you'll know more about how to tell us what you think, what you like, what you don't like, what you think we got right, and what needs some more work. So as we start to think about SEPTA services and Philadelphia and Southeast Pennsylvania, we did something that was called a market analysis. And what we wanted to understand was where the strongest markets for transit are in the region. So we looked at things like population, employment density. Those are super important for understanding how and where people travel. But we also looked at some specifics about the population. So we looked at demographic characteristics like age and race. We looked at disability status. We looked at income levels, and we did the same kind of analysis for employment, where we looked at the types of jobs that are spaced in different places, understanding that some jobs like hospitals and universities have a lot of employees, but they also attract a lot of other people to those sites. And so we combine that information into what we call a transit demand analysis or a transit demand index. And what you see in this map is the hotter colors, the bright reds, are places where we need to have frequent service, or if we provided frequent services, those buses would be full. As the colors pale out, we're still showing a demand for transit, but at a little bit less frequency. And so one of the things that we are trying to do with the bus revolution is match the service with the demand. So I think one of the things that was so exciting for us and has been really interesting is Philadelphia has a great market for transit. And that's true at a regional perspective. It's true in the core of the city. So Center City, you can see is the brightest red. It's the hottest part of the market, but all throughout the city of Philadelphia, including into the Northwest and the Northeast, into West Philadelphia, but also the surrounding communities like Norristown, of course, King of Prussia, there's still a strong market and a strong demand for transit. So we want to make sure that we're serving those areas, we're connecting them, and that people can get to and from them as easily as possible. So the next map that I have to show, it's a little bit wonky, but I do think it tells us an important story. I'm just going to go back for 1 second. If you look here and you see these red and bright colors, we know that we would expect, and we have a lot of transit riders there. And then this map shows us what portion of the riders are actually using transit. So these big blue lines show that rides or trips in and out of Center City, about 25% or more of everybody who's going into Center City is using transit. That's great. That's where we want to be. We want, we're happy to serve more of those trips. But when we look into the Northwest and the Northeast, we see that the colors or the lines are thinner, and SEPTA is only capturing a much smaller portion of the market there. That's a clue. That's an indication that the service isn't designed as well as it could be, or it's too complicated to use. And there's opportunities for us to improve and strengthen the service to serve and benefit more riders. Another thing that we have seen through the pandemic is that the times of day that people are riding the bus is changing. So this, again, is a graph for people who we as transit planners, we look at these kind of graphs all the time. What this shows is most of us know that what we call a traditional commute is really oriented around sort of this people traveling into Center City, working a traditional 9 to 5, Monday through Friday work schedule. We know during the pandemic that a lot of that was disrupted. Some of those jobs have come back, not all of them. We also saw during the pandemic the essential workers and a lot of the people that really relied on transit who needed it to be available to them, sometimes during the peak periods, but also during the middle of the day, also during the evening and on weekend days. And so this graph, what you can see here, this is the summer of 2020. So right after the pandemic, you can see there's a big drop in ridership, but it's sort of flattened throughout the day. This red one is 2021, so it's come back somewhat, but still a big gap between the type of service or the amount of riders that were there before the pandemic. So this is something that we're looking at. We see some opportunities to kind of even out the service a little bit throughout the day, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Another thing that was really obvious both in our analysis and when we spoke to riders earlier in the study is that what people told us a lot and what we saw in the data was that the service is slow and it's not reliable. So this is a map that shows bus speeds in Philadelphia, and some of the key data points are that the bus is really slow. On average, it travels about 8 miles per hour in the city of Philadelphia. Throughout the area, it's 10 miles, or the urbanized area, it's 10 miles or less. That's very, very slow. Nationally, on average, buses travel about 13, 14 miles an hour. We know people can walk 3 to 4 miles per hour. Of course, you can't walk 3 or 4 miles per hour for 5 miles, but this idea that the service is not moving as quickly and the service is not as fast and reliable as people want. The data showed that. And then we also did a bunch of surveys. I think Bev was mentioning we had a lot of events throughout the past year or so. We did some surveys. We had meetings like this, and people told us consistently that they really care about reliability. So they want to know that they can understand and be sure that if they leave their house at 7 o'clock in the morning, that they can get to work by 7:45. They want the service to be accessible. That means that they're able to walk to the bus, from the bus, that it's easy to use, easy to find, easy to understand. And then this idea of the importance of frequency, so that people aren't waiting, they don't need a schedule, that they can rely on the bus. And then just a couple of other quick points. SEPTA is doing a lot of things right with its bus service. There are 13, before the pandemic, in 2019, there were 13 routes that carried more than 10,000 riders per day. That's incredible ridership. So I think when we saw things like that, those were the things that we wanted to make sure that we didn't change, that we made sure that those core routes, those core services, that we we want to build on that success and make those routes stronger. And then at the same time, there's a lot of work to do to make the routes easier to understand, easier to use. And we can do that by making them straighter, more consistent, fewer patterns, things like that. So that's just sort of a little bit of setting the context and giving you some idea of what we looked at and what we were thinking about as we put together the draft network. And I just wanted to take a minute, Dan, and see if you had anything you wanted to add, or if there were any comments that you thought would be useful for people to hear.
Yeah. There's a few different comments. Some of them are really interesting. One of them from Aaron Glickman is asking about bus stops, which we haven't talked about a lot, but I think it's worth noting. And I think maybe as we get into Keaton sharing his network, maybe Keaton can talk about it too. Is Aaron asks about spreading out the bus stops. He's noticing I'm assuming he's looking at the remix map that we've posted online, that we're still showing stops every block. So do you want to talk about stop spacing in the context of this project?
Sure. So we do know that stop spacing is a huge part of the bus being slow, but it's also part of the bus service being accessible. And so we will be doing some stop spacing analysis and work. Right now, we're focused on the routes and the network overall and getting those right. And then we'll take another pass and look at bus stops. So I know some people may have heard us talk about that before. I think in the spring, people were like, when are you going to talk about bus stops? And we said, we're going to get to it, and we are going to get to it. We know it's a core issue for the network and SEPTA service. But at this moment, we're still focused on the bus routes.
Thanks, Bethany. The only other thing, one other comment I want to address is, just because we were talking about partnerships with the city, Daniel Trubman mentions the pilot lanes on Market and JFK, and he's right. They would be more effective with red paint. That's what he's advocating for, red paint on the lanes. I agree. We are working on that with the city now to get them treated with red paint, because that is more effective than the way they are marked now. So we are cognizant of what works and what doesn't work about the infrastructure, and we're trying to iterate and improve that. But this is a situation where I'm happy to say that we have been working with the city and PennDOT to get red paint on those lanes.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So moving ahead, what I want to do, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the draft network. And I think everybody knows, but I just want to, one of the ways that we've been thinking about how to communicate the network or the draft bus network is that it is a network. So it is a system that works together as a lot of pieces, but that network functions as with a lot of individual bus routes, right? So a lot of people are going to be interested and concerned about their individual bus route. And I think that that's fair. We want to hear from you. We want to talk about what you don't like, what you like and don't like about your individual bus route. But first, what I'm going to do is talk to you about the network overall and some of the things that we set out to accomplish and what some of the impacts are associated with this overall network. So the strategic approach kind of centered around 5 tenets or core things that we were working towards. One was increasing frequency and making sure that that frequency is available all day, every day. So weekdays and weekend days, and at the peak traditional commute times, but also during the middays, that we operate our schedules as consistently and simply as possible. So part of that is what I just said about the frequency, right? Like, so that if it's going to be 15 minutes on Monday, it's also 15 minutes a day, all day on Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So people, they don't have to remember as much, that every time they go to get on the number 7 or the 42 or whatever it is, that it always operates in the same way. That we also really tried to straighten the bus routes and make them as direct as possible. That also makes a bus network easier to use because the bus is staying on one street. It also makes it faster because turns slow down the bus route. So as much as possible, we tried to straighten things out, make them direct. We also increased connections and integration with other SEPTA bus routes so that, again, we get this overall network approach so that more people can get to more places faster and more easily. And then something we'll talk about is we've introduced some flexible on-demand service, or sometimes it's called microtransit. So in some of the suburban areas where the service levels were pretty low, so buses came every 60 minutes, sometimes not even every 60 minutes. There weren't a lot of people on those buses. We tried to introduce, or we're introducing a new service model, a different way to approach the way people can use public transit. So thinking about that just a little bit more about each of these. So I mentioned frequent service. So as I said, this is, we have really increased the frequent network. In this draft network, there's a lot more frequent service. So more frequent routes, more frequency all day, and more frequency 7 days a week. We did have to make some trade-offs to get this frequency. We didn't have additional resources that we could spend, so we had to take some service from other parts of the network and put it into the frequent network. So what this means is that there are fewer bus routes overall, and in some cases, there is less frequent service during the peak period. So we took it out during that, 6 to 9, 4 to 6, and we spread it in the middle of the day, or we spread it on the weekend days. We think this trade-off is worth it. We think we're creating a better network because it's going to be more convenient to use. People are going to wait. The wait time for the bus is going to be shorter. It's going to be easier to use because you don't need to have a schedule, and the service should also be faster, and it should be more predictable and reliable as well. Another thing, as I mentioned, is this idea of consistent schedules where the service operates the same way every day, all day. And then we also reduced a lot of service patterns or changes in the bus routes. So some of you who use the bus service, who ride SEPTA buses know this, that sometimes like the G, for example, it has a lot of different service patterns. So the 9 o'clock does one thing, the bus that leaves at 9:25 does something else. Can be really confusing for folks. So we removed a lot of those service patterns. There is a trade-off. Again, like every decision we made, it does a lot of good things, but it does involve a trade-off. So some places that have limited service are going to lose service to those places. So we want you to look at some of that, tell us what you think, but we think overall this is a better decision because it makes the bus more convenient and easier and more reliable. It's more convenient because every time you get on the G, it's going to do the same thing every trip, every day. That makes it easier for you. You don't have to remember which bus is going to take you where you want to go. And it also makes it more reliable because it's easier to schedule and predict and understand how long it's going to take to make that trip when it doesn't change. And again, straighter, more direct routes. So, traveling directly is simpler and easier. It also creates a grid, which maximizes the impact of the network. But it does mean, again, we made trade-offs in every case. The trade-offs in this case are about concentrating the bus service on fewer streets. So, and that also means in some cases, people may have to transfer between bus routes. But again, we think it's a better design. We think it's easier to use. We think it's going to be faster and more direct. We did improve the connections between SEPTA services. So this is something that SEPTA does pretty well already, but we did enhance use of the hubs and regional rail, access to the Broad Street line and the Market Frankfurt line. Again, it maximizes the impact of the network, but it does mean in some cases, some people may have to transfer more. But again, we think it's better. We think that it creates more choices, more options, and it has more reliability in the system. And then the last kind of strategic thing that I wanted to talk about was the on-demand zones or the microtransit zones. So what we're proposing here is that instead of operating low-frequency routes or buses that only come every 60 minutes or less, that we replace that with like microtransit or on-demand transit operates a little bit like Uber or Lyft, where you would schedule your trip, they would pick you up and then take you where you want to go. It does mean that some people will need to transfer. It does mean people will need to schedule their rides. But again, we think this is better. We want to hear from you. We think this makes service more convenient. We think it makes it more reliable and gives you a few more options for how you're going to get around the region. So with that, I'm going to get to the network in a second, but I did want to say, if you've participated in a Bus Revolution event in the past, you know that we've been talking about the services in terms of the MAX series. So the MAX routes, you'll see like 10 MAX, 15 MAX, 30 MAX, that's the maximum time between buses. So it's the maximum time that you would wait for a bus. If you're on a 10 MAX route, that means if you walk up to the bus, that corridor, and you're standing at the stop, a bus will come by at least in 10 minutes. It might be more frequent, but it won't be less. And just as, I think this is going to work. Yep. So we have defined frequent bus route as something that operates at 10-minute or 15-minute frequency throughout the day. And then just one more high-level slide, I just wanted to let you know. So right now, SEPTA has about 125 routes. In the draft network, we've reduced that to 99. And you can see a corresponding, fewer routes, but more frequent routes. In the draft network, there are 44. In the existing network, there's only 33. And then in terms of the on-demand zones, again, that's a new service type. So that means that we went from no microtransit services or on-demand zones to 10. So overall, there's about 10 or 15 routes per se that are eliminated, but a lot of what we did was we repackaged some routes, we streamlined some routes, we recombined things. You can take a look and see what that is, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a minute. And then you can see that the number of service hours in each network is the same. And so really what the draft network is, it's about reinvesting and reconfiguring the existing service in a way that we think is better for more people. So I'm going to show you a map, and then again, Keaton's going to show you a little bit more in a minute. But we do have what we call a slider map that's on our website. And this is SEPTA's existing network, and you can see all these gold lines. These are 60-minute services. You can the red is 10 and the green is 15. And then what you can do is take the slider and see how the network changes. And some of the things that are really obvious to me or interesting is you can see when you're just even sliding at this high level that there are fewer routes. You can also see that the routes are straighter. You can see that there's fewer gold lines, which means the 60-minute routes, and there's more red and green and purple, which are the 10, 15, and 30-minute routes. You can also see these on-demand zones as well scattered throughout the region. And again, these are some of the suburban areas where the service levels were low and ridership was low, but we wanted to make sure people still had service. So Keaton's going to show you how to use this, but this is a tool you can really, zoom in, zoom out. Like I like looking at the river wards. I think you can see how the network changes as your existing network, and here's the proposed one. So these are some of the tools that you'll be able to take a look at when you go through the website and attend some open houses and have some conversations with us about what we're proposing and what you like and what you don't like. So just a couple more slides from me. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is say, okay, what's the impact of this network? When we take a step back and we look at a macro level or overall, what is the impact? And some of the things that you can see is one of the things that we measured is how many people are within a quarter mile of a frequent transit route. So this is the population that's going to be able to just walk to the street. A bus is going to come every 10 minutes or every 15 minutes, and they're going to be able to go, Monday through Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So that you can see we've got measurements for weekday at noon, weekdays at 5 p.m., weekdays at 9 p.m., and Saturday and Sunday at noon. So for this draft network, there's about 23% more people get frequent service, access to frequent transit at noon, only about 8% more at 5 p.m. on weekdays, a lot more at 9 p.m. on weekdays, and then Saturday and Sunday, a lot more investment in these days, a lot more service on Sundays, over 300% increase for people that are within a quarter mile. We also looked at jobs. And again, you see a similar story where there are a fair amount of benefits weekdays at noon, smaller benefits at weekdays at 5 p.m., but a lot at 9 p.m. Saturday and Sunday at noon, where we're really increasing the amount of service, the amount of frequent service at those times, which makes it a lot easier for people to get to where they want to go. We also looked at low-income residents. You see the weekday noon increased somewhat. We actually had a small decrease. Weekdays at 5 p.m., about 4,000 fewer people would have access to frequent transit. I think that's something we're going to take a look at and see if we can, as we get comments from you all, if we can repair that. But weekdays at 9 p.m., Saturdays at noon, Sundays at noon, big increases again for people with low incomes who are going to have access to higher quality, frequent transit service that's going to make it easier for them to get around. And then we also looked at racial minority groups to see what the impact would be on this population as well. And again, similar story where some increase during the weekdays at noon and 5, but you start to see a lot of impact at 9 p.m. and then again on the weekend days. And so with that, I think, I don't know, Dan, did you want to say anything, or should we just have Keaton go right ahead and walk people through the website? I don't know what the comments are like.
Let's go into the tools. There were some questions, but I think let's share the tools and then see where we are with some of the questions, because I think
Okay,
some of the questions people have relate directly to how we're sharing information. So I think we should go right to that.
All right, you're on, Keaton.
Hey everyone, my name is Keaton Wetzel. So what I'm going to show you are the online tools available for you to learn more, both about the network and about the individual routes. There are a number of questions already in the Q&A about what's happening to this bus route, what's happening to that bus route, and I want to make sure you have all the tools available and understand how to use the site in order to answer many of your very excellent questions. So what I'm going to do is share my browser screen and sort of walk you through the tools we have set up for you. And so the very first place where it makes sense to start is on the project website, and that's SEPTABusRevolution.com. And we have added a new section to the website called Draft Network. And the Draft Network page will have all of these tools linked right up at the top for you to quickly access in order to answer all the questions you have. And the way that the Draft Network page is organized is sort of in two. So at the top, this web page describes the overall network changes. And then if you keep scrolling, it describes like the route by route information. And so I'm sort of going to walk you all through from top to bottom what the resources are here. The very first option under the Draft Network map is for you to download a system map. And so this is just a simple PDF. We have uploaded a PDF of the existing bus network, and then we're going, by the end of the day on Wednesday, we'll be uploading a PDF of the Draft Network. And those maps are symbolized in the same way, so you can compare the frequency of the two networks. And I think there was a question in the comment for somebody who didn't want to use the slider. How can I view the network side by side? This is the best way to do that. The slider map that Bethany presented earlier is the second option on the website. And this slider map, like Bethany mentioned, is totally interactive. And the nice thing about it is you can click an individual route and see some of the attributes about the route. The existing network's on the left and the proposed network's on the right. But if you just click a route, it'll pull up information there describing what you're looking at. The third network related tool for you to use is the remix map, and the remix map is going to be the most useful for you if you want the most detailed level of information. And so let me just pull that up here. The remix map is also interactive and shows the proposed network, and it shows it to such a detailed extent that you can click a route. In this case, it's proposed route 517. And then in parentheses next to that route number are the existing route numbers that are in some cases being combined or consolidated to create that proposed bus route. So in this case, route 517 is a combination of existing routes 3 and 5. And what you can do is a little window pops up when you select the route, and it describes the maximum amount of time that you'll have to wait for a bus during different periods of the day. So in this case, the route 517 is a 10 max route, and that means anywhere between 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. at night on weekdays, the most you'll have to wait for service is 10 minutes. And then it's a little bit less frequent during other periods of the day. But this is a really useful tool for if you want to understand which specific streets a route is using, what are the terminals or the endpoints of that route, and then what are the other routes or on-demand zones that route connects to. There also was a question in the Q&A about the bus stops that are shown here. So the way that Remix works is it's because the bus stops that the future bus network will serve are yet to be determined. Right now, we just have these bus routes serving every existing stop that is along the way, but that won't necessarily be the case once a system is implemented. Cool. So those are the network-related tools. The route-by-route information is the most useful place to go if you want to look up what's happening to a route that you, what's proposed to happen to a route that you take every day. And so this is broken down right now by region of SEPTA's service area. And you'll notice that some of this is incomplete, and that's because we're in the...
I think we lost Keaton for a moment.
Maybe while Keaton gets back on, we can try to get to some questions. Here's one question from an anonymous attendee. Is SEPTA planning to do outreach specifically to the communities losing service through the redesign?
Yes, we are planning to do a bunch of different, and again, we're going to talk a little bit about this at the end of the transit talk, but we do have open houses that are scheduled throughout the region. And then we have some specific meetings that are targeted around people that we think will either be concerned about losing service, like older adults, people with disabilities, Spanish-speaking folks, Chinese-speaking folks, parents of school-age children. And then we also have some special meetings in places where there will be a lot of service changes, like Germantown, Chester City, things like that.
Yeah. So even if it's not actually a net loss in service, or if there's a lot of change, we want to be, particularly responsive to those groups. So there's going to be a lot of outreach, which we'll outline later, but we're going to specifically look at areas that are affected. Let's see. There were some other good questions that we flagged.
So there's a good question. Will there be any thought given to better interconnectivity with other area transit systems?
So we are starting to look at this a little bit more. We obviously don't have a ton of service that crosses over into New Jersey or Delaware, but we do in this scenario, or in this proposal, do have more frequent service going to Trenton, which is something that we heard a lot during the previous rounds of engagement, and we think has a lot of value. We also have an ongoing conversation with DART in Delaware about better connections to service and how to integrate the modes better. So it's something those are ongoing. There's some complicated aspects of those types of connections, but we are looking at them, and I think that if maybe not sort of day one of bus revolution, but it's something that on an ongoing basis we're going to be looking at.
We have a question. Why is the bus revolution explicitly cost neutral, while reimagining regional rail is not?
So I can take that one. So reimagining regional rail is a great project. It's really identifying long-term capital improvements. And we are going to do that with this project. We are going to identify capital improvements, but capital money is different than operational money. Everyone probably gets sick of hearing that, but part of this project, at least with the first phase of this, is that it is meant to be budget neutral, run with the same number of operators, the same number of vehicles, the same number of service hours. We will be identifying ways we can invest additional operational resources if we are lucky enough to get them into the future. But from where we sit now, this project has always been designed to be a budget neutral project.
All right. Next question. With more transfers for some people, will SEPTA increase the number of free transfers between rides?
So we've gotten a lot of questions about transfers in the chat, and the first transfer is free using the key card. I know that's not sufficient for many folks, and it is something that we would like to look at from a policy perspective. Somebody mentioned having time transfers, which I think is a wonderful idea, and I know that other agencies do that. I think transferring should be free. Within a reasonable time frame, whatever the definition of reasonable is, but it is something that we'd like to look at because we are cognizant that this is a project that could promote transferring in certain contexts, and we want to make sure that we're building a network that people can use for their trips.
All right, some bus routes like the 521 or currently 54 are very close to bus loops. Is there a consideration to extend the bus route for connection opportunities, layover facilities, et cetera?
I think it's very context. It's very specific to that situation. If you know anything, if you've been in one of these meetings before, I'm sure you've heard us talk about end of lines. We have a vast network of end of line locations. Some are large transit centers, some are tiny little loops, and some are curbs. and we have to be mindful of overloading any of them through this process. So if there's a specific service modification that you're looking at, that you're thinking about, definitely put that in there and provide that as feedback, or write us at our email address, busnetwork@septa.org. And mention it. But it's something that we're going to be looking at. But we are very cognizant of capacity at our end of line locations, because it's such a huge issue for our services, is being able to use our end of line network.
All right. Next question. So the 10 max equals the maximum time you have to wait. But does that mean, say, during rush hour, there's a possibility it will come every 7 minutes? Same for the max 15. Could they come every 10 minutes during certain times of the day?
Right. So I can take a first stab at that, Dan. So the answer is yes. So a 10 max route, that's the maximum amount of time. And right now, when you look at the remix maps and the way that we're talking about the system, we're just calling everything a 10 max or a 15 max. What we're also doing behind the scenes is we're looking at each route and seeing how many riders it carries at what time of the day, so that we know if we need to provide even more service, that we have that service to provide. So yes, at certain times of the day, a 10 max route could come every 5 minutes. 15 max could come every 10 minutes. But it's the floor, right? That's the maximum time that you'll have to wait between bus routes.
All right. Appreciate the goals and trade-offs to get to them. Many current transit delays and detours are caused by no-notice street closures in every area of the city at all hours of the day. How is that being addressed?
So the detours are a huge problem, right? And we've been hearing about that since we started this project. And actually, when we've been out, we've also observed those impacts of the detours. So we are working, SEPTA is working with the city of Philadelphia to kind of coordinate a little bit better on those. I also think that this draft network design, the way that it is organized, will eliminate some of those problems, because it's going to make things are going to be a little bit simpler and a little bit easier, right? Because the G is going to do the same thing every day. So you don't have to worry about a detour on some of these streets that it only goes on once or twice throughout the day. And so I think I know it's not going to solve all of the problems, that really it needs to be some structural changes and communication issues with the city of Philadelphia. But by simplifying the design of the service, we should be able to help with that problem somewhat.
I had a couple questions about evening service. So how can we put more shuttle buses on the Night Owl, Market Frankfurt L bus after midnight? Noting that we have working people leaving UPS, FedEx, Amazon late at night. We need the buses more often on the routes. Another question asked about a weekend evening service generally.
So I think there's a bunch of things in that question. Yeah. And I do think that we are, trying to create this network that is simpler and cleaner and more consistent. So, and again, we're also looking at the number of people who are using it. So we have the max. We're trying to match the amount of service that we provide with the amount of the amount of people who need to use that service. So that is true on weekend evenings, and also weekend day evenings, and also weekday evenings. And in some cases, we've actually increase the frequency a little bit in the evening when we know that there's been some safety issues. So we've been trying to really be careful and attuned to that. And I just got a note. I just wanted to, it looks like Keaton's back.
I am. I'm sorry. I'm having some computer issues, but I'm here.
Okay. Do you want to go back to the website for a minute and finish that up? Or do you think you're stable enough, or do you want me to do that?
I'm not stable enough. Sorry.
Okay. So why don't we do this, Henry? I'll go back and finish walking through the website, and then if there's a couple more, and then I'll, kind of close out, and then we'll take a few more questions at the end.
Sounds good.
All right. So Keaton was walking everybody through the website, septabusrevolution.com. And what he was just was showing everybody was the route by route information. So I'll just let you all know that the website went live today. We're still uploading some things. There's still some information that will be coming. And as Keaton mentioned, we've organized the individual bus routes around the certain areas. 69th Street is populated. what you can do here is the route information sheet. So you can see the existing route. Let me, this has a map of the proposed route and the existing route. In this case, there was only a small change in the route. And then you can see we described the change, shows you the connections to the 10 max and the 15 max, and then also changes in the schedule. So in this case, the existing service operates at around 30 minutes a day. So it's not a whole lot of change, a little bit of smoothing out and cleaning up. But again, like we showed in some of those graphics, on those Saturday and Sunday, there is quite a bit more service and it's a lot more consistent throughout the day. So there is going to be a lookup table. I don't see it here right now, but that will be up tomorrow. We'll get that to be one of the first things that goes back up, where you can say, usually I ride the 7 or the 42 or the G, and then we can show you and it shows what route is in the new system, because we have some new numbers, which are just temporary, but for to help us kind of communicate and explain the network. We are also going to have a trip planner. Some of you are very clever and found the trip planner in Transit app over the weekend. So right now, we only have it on the mobile app. So on the website, it shows you how to walk you through the different ways that you can find the network and you can plan your trip that way. We will be having a web-based tool that you can plan your trip later in the month. That's going to take us, it's not going to be here this week or next week, but before the end of October, we should have something up for that. So these are some of the resources that you have to look at the draft network. There's some fact sheets here that explain, and we also have those translated in some different languages. We just will be getting those up. And then there's a lot of information about the transit talks, the open houses that we're holding and scheduling, and then some of the virtual conversations. So you can also, and some of these already have links, or most of them do, so you can go ahead and start to register for some transit talks or these community conversations, where we'll spend a lot of time speaking really specifically about what's happening in South Philly or West Philly or Delaware County, and take a lot of questions about how those services are changing. Of course, you can sign up and get put on our mailing list. We've got a bunch of people asking for that today already, which has been really great. So just kind of recapping, a big part of what we wanted to do today was generate some interest and give everybody a high-level overview about what's happening, so that you'll want to learn more. You're going to want to come to an open house and talk to us, or participate in a virtual meeting, or go to the website and see what we've got. You can also request that the Bus Revolution team, somebody from our team, Dan, myself, Keaton, one of us can come to one of your meetings, talk about the Bus Revolution, what it means for your area or your community, and get some feedback from you that way as well. So right now, I think we have 15 or 16 open houses planned. We're going to add a couple more. There were a couple areas that we missed, and so we'll be filling those in. So this schedule is on the website, but it's going to be updated. I think we have 8 virtual community conversations. So every Monday night, not next Monday because that's a holiday, Indigenous Peoples Day, but otherwise, and I think we skipped Halloween too, but otherwise every Monday, from 5:30 to 6:30, we're going to have a virtual community conversation. We'll be talking about specific parts of the subregion of the SEPTA region and what's happening. We also have a series of focus groups and targeted meetings at geographic areas, so that we can really roll up our sleeves and work with certain populations that we've heard have some concerns about what's happening with Bus Revolution, or their geographic area has some changes that we want to make sure that people have an opportunity to weigh in. And this includes areas that are getting the on-demand zones or the microtransit. We are specifically targeting those areas where that change is proposed, so we can hear from people, see what they like, what they don't like. As mentioned, we'd love to have you invite us to your meeting. We can do that virtually. We can do that in person. You can sign up on the website. If that's not live right now, it will be live in the next day or two. So we are also producing a lot of materials. And again, the website's always going to be the best place for you to get the most information. You can also, like we said, the transit app has a trip planner right now, the website. We've got all that information on individual routes. And then hopefully you'll be seeing our signs everywhere, telling you that your ride's about to get more reliable. So you're interested and want to go see what we're proposing. Ask us questions, tell us what you like, what you're concerned about. And so with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And we can do a few more. I think we have a few more minutes for Q&A, Henry, or maybe it's time for the polling. I'm not sure.
Sure.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left, so we could do the polling and then see if there's time for one or two more questions.
I do see there's like over 100.
All right, I'll launch a poll.
Yeah.
All right. So while you're filling out this poll, I can say there's a lot of great questions in the Q&A about specific routes as well. And we set up all these open houses and community conversations where if you join us for a previous community conversations, we really get in depth about those specific questions about routes, and we'll bring up the map and we'll dive in. But since we just released the draft network today, I know it's fresh. You guys are just starting to explore it. So definitely take a look at that and then register for the community conversation in your area. And come with questions, and be happy to dive into those specific route questions there.
So do you plan to attend an open house? Yes or no, or you're not sure? And what materials or kinds of information are you most looking forward to exploring? What would you like to have more information about? So let's see your answers to these two questions. So yes, 61% said that they plan to attend an open house, 32 not sure, and only 8% said no. So that's good to know. And then the second question, what materials are you most interested in? The draft network map, 74%. And well, these are pretty close. There's one. The route level information, 74%. So you want to know what's happening with your route. So do I.
Bethany, do the route change sheets cover every route?
They do. There's 120 of them. So there's 125 bus routes. And then I think we have about 100, close to 100. I think we made 120 route sheets. So everything's there. And I did notice that in the comments, somebody asked about the logic behind the route numbering system. And there is a logic behind it. The numbers correspond with a county. So they're, and then it's just numbered from there, but there is some logic to that. We haven't made a decision if we're going to change the bus route numbering or not. It's just a way for us to describe the network because so many routes were combined or streamlined or took pieces of that it was hard to keep the existing names. It was really challenging for us. I know in some ways it might be easier for folks, but we spent a lot of time thinking about it and talking about it, and this is what we ended up doing. So
yeah, our numbering system is random now, so it's sort of hard to give order to. I do feel like it's okay to say that we will likely be changing the routes with letter designations. That seems to be something that we're going to do to get everything numbered and that kind of thing. But we haven't made any decisions regarding what if any numbering system we'll adopt.
We had well over 100 questions this evening, and we have about a minute, 2 minutes left. So,
all right. Do the max routes account for weekend service too? I know you said that 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. So that 10 max, 15 max, is it weekend as well?
Yes, it is. 10 max routes revert to 15-minute service during the weekend days, but frequent service is frequent every day. All
right. Dan, did you see anything comments you wanted to respond?
No, nothing specific. There's a lot of good questions though, but I do want to note, and I've responded with this in several exchanges. If your question didn't get answered, feel free to write it at busnetwork@septa.org, and we'll try to get back to you. Some of the questions here are about specific routes, so that may or may not be part of the proposal. If that is something you're interested in, again, please write us and we can talk. We can send you, a direct link to the change sheet and kind of show you, if there are changes to that route or if we're missing something. But we wanted to make sure that to spend at least one night getting people accustomed to using the tool, to looking at the tools, so that when they start perusing the project site, they feel more comfortable. And I do hope to see all of you come out to one of our meetings or go online at one of our community conversations. And we did have one question about how to sign up for those, and we'll set up links for all of those, and they'll be sent out on sort of a regular basis, as we wrap up. But the first one, I think Bethany showed the calendar before. The first one's not until October 17th, which is 2 weeks from tonight.
Right. So yeah, thank you everybody who came tonight, listened to us for a whole hour. We really appreciated everyone's comments and in the Q&A and chat. And, just thank you for participating. Hope to see you soon.
Great. Thank you.